Some years ago, I was traveling from the north, and when I got to Accra, I decided to alight at Circle around 3 a.m. I saw some guys around, and I thought I could have company, so I decided to alight over there. Oblivious to me, these guys were actually pickpockets. So when I alighted, by the time I could say Jack, these guys had surrounded me, and then they demanded for my phone. I did give my phone to them, all right. Anyway, it wasn't a smartphone. It was a YAM. And they also asked for some money, and I did give them some money. After this incident, I started to think about some of the implications of their actions. I asked myself, if they had been arrested and probably imprisoned together with other hardened criminals, will that be just? Just punishments in Ghana, weighing in on the use of community service as an alternative to incarcerating petty offenders. Now, in every society, I believe that there are classes of offenders. I'll basically limit myself to three. That is, first of all, we have those who steal with their pens, as in corruption. And then we have those who steal even with arms. And the last on my list are the pickpockets. Those I encountered some years back. According to some scholars, there are basically reasons why someone must be punished for committing a crime. First of all, we have the issue of incapacitation, deterrence, to deter the offender and also potential offenders in future. Moreover, punishment is to serve as a way of rehabilitating the offender. And then the last one I have, the purposes of retribution. We weigh your offense, and we find the kind of punishment that is commensurate with that particular offense. Now, there are basically two modes of sentencing an offender, that is custodial and non-custodial. For the custodial sentences, we have incarceration, and then we have, for the non-custodial sentences, an example being community service. By community service, what we mean is that an offender is given a sentence even in the community instead of throwing the fellow behind bars. So you do some work in the community as a form of a sentence. Now, some countries have implemented community service in their sentencing regime. And basically, there are reasons why they've implemented community service. One, because they think it is financially prudent. They are able to save some money instead of spending a lot of money in feeding inmates and then also taking care of their medical bills. Also, community service is used as a way of decongesting prisons. If the numbers in the prisons swell, you can use community service as a way of reducing the numbers in prisons. Community service could also be used in reducing reoffending, or what is technically known as recidivism. The idea is that when an offender, a petty offender, is incarcerated together with other hardened criminals, per the social learning theory, they go to learn other hardened ways of committing crime. So when the fellow is done serving the sentence and comes out, the fellow becomes hardened than before. So the visual cycle continues. So community service is one of the ways by which you can shield offenders from going into prisons to come into contact with other hardened criminals to learn other hardened ways of committing crime. Now, therefore, I sought to explore the attitude of Ghanaians toward the use of community service, and also to find out if the severity of an offense affects the attitude of Ghanaians towards sentencing offenders to community service. Some studies have been done in Africa with regards to the use of community service as an alternative sentencing condition for petty offenders. Research is done by the Penal Reform International in Kenya and Uganda have been able to table facts to the effect that community service has been able to reduce prison numbers and then also has been a cost-effective measure in those countries. In Ghana, the Law Reform Commission conducted a study exploring the use of other non-custodial sentences. So they found out that Ghanaians were largely in support of other sentences like probation and then the use of fines. But one that was missing was community service as a viable alternative. Therefore, I sought to widen the scope a bit by interviewing a lot of stakeholders to find out their attitude towards community service specifically. I followed due scientific processes. And as part of the scientific process, I interviewed 24 different stakeholders, comprising lawyers, magistrates, offenders, pastors, imams, community members, and even parliamentarians. Now, these interviews were transcribed and subjected to thematic analysis per the steps stipulated by Brown and Clark. What I found. Out of these interviews, I was able to group even their voices into forms of community service, psychosocial reasons for which they think community service could be used as a viable alternative to incarceration, and then also the circumstances surrounding the offense. Now, for the form that community service should take, most of these participants or stakeholders were of the view that community service could be used as a way of tackling the problem of sanitation in Accra. So a woman had this to say, that we have a problem with sanitation, which if people were rightly mobilized in that area, it will help us. It will help us simply evokes the idea of Afrocentric jurisprudence. What it simply means is that in Africa, when a crime is committed, a kind of social disequilibrium is created. So the relationship between the offender, the victim, and the rest of the community is truncated. So to her, community service could be used as a way of restoring that truncated relationship between the offender, the victim, and the rest of the community. An official from Strach thought that community service could be used as a reformatory tool. So he said that they go there to meet the hardened criminals and they learn from them. Per the social learning theory that I earlier stated, when a petty offender is incarcerated together with other hardened criminals, they learn even other hardened ways of committing crime. And when they come out, they continue to commit that crime. So if you use community service, then what you are doing is that you are actually shielding these petty offenders from coming into contact with other hardened criminals. And by so doing, they don't learn other hardened ways of committing crime. Then, a magistrate who personally visited the Insawam prisons had this to say, that the place is congested and needs decongestion. Community service could be one of the ways of decongesting our prisons. So if we happen to sentence most of these offenders to community service, we'll in the end be able to reduce the numbers even in our prisons. Even a victim of theft thought that community service could be used as a cost-effective measure. This victim of theft thought that there is no wisdom in incarcerating petty offenders and spending a lot of money feeding them and taking care of their medical bills, whereas they could serve their sentence in the community, do something that will benefit all of us. So he said, community service is okay. At least it is better than nothing at all, or sending them to jail, which causes financial loss to the state as a whole. Moreover, an imam thought that community service could be a way of deterring other people from committing such crimes or similar ones in future. So he said that, okay, once we talk about community service and the person is doing it, other people are watching. You understand? So as others are seeing, it deters them from doing it. So if someone is serving a community service, others see, and by seeing, they get deterred from committing such crimes or similar ones in future. However, a lawyer from the Law Reform Commission thought that a lot of Ghanaians will kick against the use of community service. Why? Because we have a punitive mindset. Probably, they would think that community service is not actually commensurate with the kind of offenses that people commit. So he said that we have the idea of putting offenders behind bars in order to teach them a lesson. With this voice, it appears as if Ghanaians might kick against it. Nevertheless, a magistrate thought that the way the theft was carried out, we thought of something or somebody stealing, let's say, a bunch of plantain. It depends on how it was stolen. So to him, the facts of the matter should determine the gravity of the offense as to whether the fellow should be committed or should be given a community service. Now, the offense's gravity. In the same vein, a lawyer thought that, okay, my point is that I embrace it, but I'm not embracing it that it should replace every form of nonviolent offense. So to him, if an offense is quite grievous, then community service is not really appropriate. Moreover, a Christian leader thought that in terms of the gravity of an offense, we could actually group offenses into either luxuries or necessities. So if someone actually stole to satisfy just a basic need, then the fellow should not be committed to even incarceration, but should be given a community service. But if the fellow has his basic needs met, and because of greed, he thinks he can steal, then of course the fellow should not be considered for community service. Now, what are some of the implications of these voices that we've heard? That there is a need to consider the introduction of community service, at least on a pilot basis, just like other nations in Africa have been able to achieve. And that the duration of the sentence should be commensurate with the category and severity of the offense. Before I take my seat, I'll leave you with the thoughts of Alvin Toffler. That the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn and relearn. But the evidence table before you this morning, I believe that the time is right, that Ghana considers the use of community service as a viable alternative to the incarcerating of petty offenders. There is hope for the land of our birth. Thank you.